Have you ever felt a connection that didn't make sense on the surface? The messages slow down. The energy feels distant. And yet something tells you that you haven't been forgotten. You tell yourself to move on, but his presence lingers in your thoughts, and strangely, yours seems to linger in his too. What if his silence isn't indifference, but hesitation? What if the distance you feel is actually the space where his thoughts keep returning to you? Most people believe that interest is obvious, loud, and constant, but real emotional tension often hides in quiet behavior, subtle patterns, and moments that seem accidental but aren't. If you know what to look for, the signs are unmistakable. Stay with me, because once you understand this, you'll stop chasing reassurance and start seeing the truth clearly. Sometimes the people who think about you the most are the ones who say the least. Men often hide emotional attachment behind emotional distance because attachment threatens the sense of control they are conditioned to maintain. From an early age, many men learn that emotional exposure equals weakness, vulnerability equals risk, and dependence equals loss of power. As a result, when feelings begin to deepen, the instinct is not always to move closer, but to pull back. Distance becomes a shield not against the other person, but against the intensity of their own emotions. Emotional attachment creates internal conflict. On one side, there is the pull toward connection, comfort, and emotional safety. On the other side, there is fear of losing independence, fear of rejection, or fear of not being enough. Instead of resolving this conflict through communication, many men manage it through withdrawal. Distance gives them time to process without having to explain what they themselves do not yet understand. This is why emotional distance should not automatically be interpreted as lack of interest. Often, it appears at the exact moment attachment begins to form. When something feels casual, there is no need for distance. When it starts to matter, self-protection activates. The mind looks for space to regain balance. Pulling back reduces emotional stimulation, allowing the nervous system to settle. Unfortunately, this coping mechanism is often misunderstood by the person on the receiving end. Men who hide attachment behind distance are not emotionally absent. They are emotionally overloaded. Their silence is not empty. It is crowded with thoughts they do not know how to organize. They replay conversations, analyze interactions, and question their own reactions. Distance becomes a way to think without pressure, to feel without being seen. There is also a control element involved. Emotional attachment introduces unpredictability. Caring means the outcome matters. Distance restores a sense of control by reducing emotional exposure. When a man pulls away, he may feel more stable, even though the attachment remains intact underneath. This is why he often returns after periods of silence. The distance helped him regulate, not detach. Another reason emotional distance hides attachment is fear of vulnerability. Attachment requires openness, and openness creates the possibility of rejection. For men who equate vulnerability with loss of dignity, distance feels safer than honesty. It allows them to remain connected internally while appearing unaffected externally. The connection does not disappear, it simply goes underground. This pattern is reinforced by past experiences. If a man has been hurt, criticized, or shamed for expressing emotion before, he learns to associate closeness with pain. Emotional distance becomes a learned survival strategy. Even when he wants closeness, his body remembers danger. Distance feels familiar. Attachment does not always feel safe, even when it is genuine. Emotional distance also allows idealization to grow. When he steps back, he is left with memory rather than interaction. Memory tends to soften edges and highlight meaning. He remembers how he felt around her, the calm, the laughter, the understanding. These feelings deepen attachment internally, even while he remains distant externally. This creates a paradox where the attachment strengthens while communication weakens. The difficulty is that emotional distance can look identical to indifference. Without context, silence feels like rejection. But indifference lacks emotional tension. Emotional distance is full of it. There is hesitation, inconsistency, and return. He may disappear, then reappear as if nothing happened. This is not because he forgot, but because he never fully left emotionally. Understanding this does not mean tolerating neglect or waiting indefinitely. It means recognizing that distance is not always a verdict on your worth. It is often a reflection of someone else's emotional limitations. The mistake many women make is trying to close the distance through pursuit. Pursuit increases pressure and intensifies fear, pushing him further into withdrawal. The most revealing part of emotional distance is what happens when pressure is removed. When there is no demand, no confrontation, and no emotional chasing, true attachment either surfaces or fades. Distance reveals its purpose over time. If attachment is real, the distance will eventually feel unbearable to him. If it is not, the distance will become permanent. Emotional attachment hidden behind distance is fragile, conflicted, and real at the same time. It exists quietly, often invisibly, but it shapes behavior in subtle ways. Understanding this helps you respond with clarity rather than confusion, awareness rather than self-blame, and self-respect rather than emotional overextension. Silence and inconsistency can be signs of internal conflict rather than indifference, because conflict creates hesitation, and hesitation disrupts natural flow. When someone is indifferent, their behavior is consistent. They move on cleanly, their energy is steady, and their absence feels final. Internal conflict, however, produces irregular patterns. One moment there is closeness, curiosity, or warmth. The next there is withdrawal, delay, or silence. This inconsistency is not random. It reflects a mind that has not resolved what it wants versus what it fears. When a man is internally conflicted, his emotions and logic are not aligned. Emotion pulls him toward connection, while logic warns him to stay guarded. Silence becomes a pause button. It allows him to avoid making a decision while still holding the emotional thread. He is not choosing to disappear completely, nor is he choosing to step forward fully. He stays in between because committing to either direction feels risky. Inconsistency often appears when feelings deepen beyond comfort. Early interest is usually smooth and confident because there is little at stake. As emotional significance grows, the cost of vulnerability increases. Silence emerges as a way to manage that cost. It reduces exposure while preserving possibility. He is buying time, not walking away. The mind uses delay to soften emotional intensity. Another reason silence signals conflict is because expressing emotion requires clarity. When someone does not fully understand their own feelings, they struggle to communicate them. Silence becomes safer than saying the wrong thing. Rather than risk revealing confusion, uncertainty, or fear, they retreat into quiet. This retreat is not the absence of thought, but the presence of too much of it. Inconsistency also reflects shifting internal states. Some days he feels close, connected, and open. On other days, fear takes over. This fluctuation shows up as mixed signals. He reaches out, then pulls back. He shows interest, then goes cold. These shifts are exhausting for the person experiencing them, but they are equally exhausting for the person producing them. Internal conflict drains emotional energy, making consistency difficult. Silence can also be a form of emotional self-regulation. When feelings rise beyond what he can manage, withdrawal helps him calm down. This does not mean the feelings disappear, they settle. Once settled, curiosity and attachment resurface, leading to re-engagement. This cycle continues until the conflict is resolved or the connection fades naturally. It is important to understand that indifference lacks emotional tension. There is no hesitation, no return, no internal debate. Silence caused by indifference feels empty. Silence caused by conflict feels heavy. It lingers. It carries an unspoken presence. You may feel it intuitively as unfinished, unresolved, or suspended. Inconsistency also appears because internal conflict creates guilt. He may care, but feel unable or unwilling to offer what is expected. That guilt leads to avoidance. Silence becomes a way to escape the pressure of expectations without confronting them directly. At the same time, attachment prevents complete disengagement, so he reappears when the emotional weight shifts. Past experiences play a role here as well. If expressing feelings previously led to rejection, criticism, or loss of control, silence becomes a learned response to emotional activation. Inconsistency reflects old coping mechanisms being triggered by new attachment. The behavior belongs more to the past than the present moment. This is why trying to force clarity through confrontation often backfires. Confrontation increases pressure and intensifies conflict. Silence, when met with steadiness rather than pursuit, allows the internal process to unfold. When there is no demand, the conflict either resolves into action or dissolves into detachment. Understanding silence and inconsistency as signals of internal conflict helps shift perspective. Instead of personalizing the behavior as rejection, it becomes information about emotional capacity. It reveals what someone is struggling to integrate within themselves. This understanding does not require tolerating confusion indefinitely, but it does prevent unnecessary doubt, and emotional overextension. Internal conflict always seeks resolution. Silence and inconsistency are temporary states, not destinations. Over time, the tension either pushes the person toward honesty and commitment or toward withdrawal and release. Observing which direction the behavior moves toward reveals far more than words ever could. Subtle behaviors reveal deeper emotional investment than words because words are often filtered through intention, image, and self-protection, while subtle behaviors leak from the subconscious without planning. What a person says can be shaped to control perception. What they do unconsciously is shaped by what they feel. When emotional attachment exists, it shows up in patterns that are difficult to suppress, even when someone is trying to appear detached or indifferent. One of the clearest signs of emotional investment is attention to detail. When a man remembers small things you mentioned casually, brings them up later without prompting, or references moments that seemed insignificant at the time, it indicates mental presence. The mind does not store details without emotional relevance. Memory follows meaning. If you occupy space in his thoughts, your words, habits, and preferences are encoded more deeply than surface interactions. Another subtle behavior is emotional timing. A man who thinks about you often reaches out at moments of vulnerability rather than convenience. Late nights, quiet mornings, or emotionally charged situations are when unresolved feelings surface. These moments bypass social performance. They are driven by internal need rather than habit. Even brief or indirect contact during these times suggests emotional gravity. Changes in energy also reveal investment. When someone is emotionally engaged, their tone, pace, and presence shift around you, even if their words remain neutral. They may become quieter, more attentive, or slightly guarded. This shift reflects emotional regulation in real time. He is managing feelings, not performing indifference. Indifference is relaxed. Emotional investment creates tension, and tension shows in behavior before it shows in language. Subtle protective behaviors are another indicator. A man who cares often monitors emotional risk. He may avoid certain topics, hesitate before responding, or steer conversations away from areas that could expose vulnerability. This caution is not disinterest. It is containment. He is protecting something he values, but does not feel ready to reveal. The effort to control exposure signals emotional importance. Behavioral consistency in small gestures also matters more than dramatic declarations. Consistent checking, quiet support, or showing up in understated ways reflects sustained mental engagement. Words can be exaggerated in moments of intensity. Subtle actions require ongoing emotional investment. They are repeated not for effect, but because the attachment is present beneath awareness. Another revealing behavior is comparison. When a man brings up experiences, ideas, or people in a way that indirectly relates to you, it suggests internal referencing. He is measuring new input against his connection with you. This mental comparison is a sign of attachment. Indifference does not compare, it replaces. Emotional mirroring also happens unconsciously. When someone starts adopting your phrases, emotional rhythms, or perspectives, it indicates psychological closeness. Mirroring is a subconscious bonding behavior. It emerges when the mind aligns with another person's emotional frequency. Words may deny interest, but mirroring reveals it. Even avoidance can be revealing when it is selective. Avoidance paired with monitoring is not disinterest. If he avoids direct conversation, but remains aware of your life, notices changes, or reacts indirectly, it shows unresolved emotional pull. True indifference does not watch from a distance. It disengages fully. Subtle behaviors also show up in how he speaks about you to others, even indirectly. If he references you in conversations where you are not the focus, it suggests ongoing mental presence. The mind surfaces emotionally significant people spontaneously. There is no effort involved. The reason subtle behaviors matter more than words is because they bypass ego. Words are often chosen to protect pride, avoid vulnerability, or maintain control. Subtle behaviors emerge when the ego is distracted or tired. They reveal what the person cannot fully suppress. This is why watching patterns matters more than listening to promises. Patterns reveal where emotional energy flows consistently. Words reveal what someone wants to appear to feel. Emotional investment always leaks through behavior, especially in moments of inattention, stress, or emotional honesty. Understanding this allows you to observe without overreacting. You do not need to confront or decode every signal. You simply notice whether emotional energy returns to you naturally. Subtle behaviors are quiet confirmations. They do not demand interpretation. They reveal themselves over time through repetition and emotional coherence. Thinking about someone often shows through unconscious actions because the subconscious mind expresses attachment long before the conscious mind is willing to admit it. Conscious behavior is controlled, filtered, and shaped by intention. Unconscious behavior is automatic. It leaks through habits, timing, attention, and micro decisions that are not planned. When a person occupies someone's thoughts, they begin influencing behavior in ways that feel accidental but are not. One of the most common unconscious actions is checking behavior. A man who thinks about you may check his phone without a clear reason, open apps where you might appear, or pause when he sees your name or image, even if he does not engage. These actions are driven by anticipation rather than intention. The mind expects emotional input, so the body follows that expectation automatically. Another unconscious sign is temporal alignment. He may reach out at moments when emotions are naturally heightened, such as late at night, early in the morning, or during transitions like travel or downtime. These moments lower mental defenses. When the mind relaxes, unresolved thoughts surface. Contact at these times is rarely strategic. It happens because the subconscious is louder when distractions fade. Unconscious actions also appear in emotional regulation. When someone is thinking about you, their mood can shift based on indirect reminders. Music, places, or phrases associated with you can affect their emotional state without them realizing why. They may become quieter, nostalgic, or distracted after encountering these triggers. These reactions are automatic responses to stored emotional memory. Body language reveals thought as well. A man who is mentally preoccupied may show hesitation, delayed responses, or changes in posture when your name is mentioned. Even if he keeps his words neutral, his body reacts faster than his logic. The nervous system responds to emotional relevance instantly before conscious control can intervene. Another unconscious action is preservation. He may hold on to objects, messages, or memories connected to you longer than necessary. He might not read messages deliberately, but he avoids deleting them. He keeps photos, notes, or reminders without a clear reason. These behaviors reflect emotional attachment, trying to maintain access, even in silence. Mental comparison also drives unconscious behavior. When someone new enters his life, he may unconsciously compare them to you. This shows up as dissatisfaction, hesitation, or emotional flatness in other interactions. He may not realize why connections feel lacking, only that something feels off. The subconscious uses existing emotional benchmarks, and if you occupy that benchmark, it influences his behavior invisibly. Another sign is narrative referencing. He may bring up topics, ideas, or experiences that align with conversations you once had without mentioning you directly. This indicates that your perspective still shapes his thinking. The mind continues dialogues internally even when external communication has stopped. Avoidance can also be unconscious. If thinking about you brings emotional discomfort, he may avoid places, conversations, or situations that remind him of you. Avoidance does not mean absence of thought. It means the thought carries weight. The emotional charge is strong enough to require management, and management often happens through avoidance rather than confrontation. Speech patterns can shift unconsciously as well. He may adopt phrases, humor, or emotional expressions that mirror yours. Mirroring is not intentional imitation. It is a bonding response. The brain aligns with what feels emotionally familiar, and that alignment shapes behavior subtly over time. Even silence can be an unconscious action. Silence that persists alongside monitoring, curiosity, or emotional fluctuations suggest unresolved thought. True disinterest is quiet and clean. Thought-driven silence is heavy and inconsistent. The mind is active even when behavior is restrained. Unconscious actions are difficult to fake because they are not chosen. They occur when attention slips and emotion takes over. This is why they are more reliable indicators than verbal reassurance or denial. Words can be crafted to protect pride or avoid vulnerability. Unconscious actions bypass those defenses and reveal where emotional energy is actually invested. Recognizing these behaviors does not require interpretation or pursuit. It requires observation. When someone is thinking about you constantly, their behavior will orbit your presence in subtle ways, even when they try to stand still. Emotional resistance often appears when feelings are strongest because attachment creates internal conflict between desire and self-protection. When a man is thinking about you constantly, part part of him wants closeness, while another part fears loss of control, rejection, or vulnerability. This tension produces behaviors that seem contradictory on the surface, but are emotionally consistent underneath. One of the clearest signs of emotional resistance is inconsistency. He may move towards you emotionally, then pull back without explanation. This is not confusion about you. It is conflict within himself. His mind returns to you repeatedly, but his defenses activate to prevent emotional exposure. The push and pull pattern reflects depth of feeling paired with fear of its consequences. Another indicator is overthinking communication. A man who is emotionally affected often delays responses, not because he does not care, but because he cares too much. He replays messages, edits replies, and weighs outcomes. Indifference responds easily. Emotional investment creates hesitation. Silence in this case is not absence of thought. It is excess of thought. Defensiveness can also signal emotional attachment. When feelings are strong, the ego becomes alert. He may become guarded, sarcastic, or emotionally distant during moments that feel too revealing. These reactions are not about pushing you away. They are about maintaining internal balance. The closer the emotional proximity, the stronger the defensive response can become. Another form of resistance is intellectualizing emotions. Instead of expressing feeling directly, he may analyze situations, explain behaviors logically, or frame emotional moments as coincidences. This allows him to stay mentally engaged while avoiding emotional exposure. The mind builds explanations to keep the heart contained. Avoiding labels or definitions is also common. When someone is thinking about you deeply, defining the connection makes it real, and reality demands vulnerability. By keeping things undefined, he can remain emotionally attached without confronting the risk that comes with acknowledgement. This avoidance does not reflect lack of feeling. It reflects fear of consequence. Emotional resistance often includes monitoring without engaging. He may watch from a distance, notice changes in your life, or remain aware of your emotional state without stepping forward. This behavior indicates unresolved attachment. True disinterest disengages completely. Resistance stays close but hidden. Projection can also occur. When emotions feel overwhelming, a man may attribute distance or uncertainty to you rather than himself. He may assume you are pulling away, uninterested, or distracted, even without evidence. This projection protects him from confronting his own emotional vulnerability by externalizing the threat. Another subtle sign is delayed honesty. He may reveal emotions indirectly through stories, metaphors, or references to past experiences that mirror his feelings for you. This allows partial expression without full exposure. Emotional truth leaks out in safe forms when direct expression feels too risky. Physical cues can reflect emotional resistance as well. Tension, restlessness, or changes in behavior around you suggest internal regulation. The body reacts to emotional pressure even when the mind resists acknowledging it. Calmness belongs to indifference. Tension belongs to attachment under restraint. The reason emotional resistance matters is because it often gets misinterpreted as lack of interest. In reality, resistance is the shadow of feeling. People do not resist what they do not care about. Resistance requires energy. That energy comes from emotional investment. Understanding this shifts perception. Instead of taking inconsistency personally, you recognize it as internal conflict. Instead of chasing clarity, you allow space for emotional truth to surface naturally. Emotional resistance eventually resolves in one of two ways: expression or withdrawal. Both are outcomes of deep feeling, not absence of it. When someone thinks about you constantly but resists emotionally, their behavior will reflect tension, hesitation, and guarded closeness. These patterns reveal a mind that has not let go, even if the heart is afraid to speak. When someone is thinking about you constantly, their behavior eventually reaches a point where internal pressure seeks resolution. The mind can only circle the same emotional focus for so long before it demands expression, release, or restructuring. This is where patterns begin to change, often quietly, but decisively. One outcome is emotional disclosure, even if it is partial. A man who has held thoughts back may suddenly speak more openly, not necessarily confessing everything, but revealing vulnerability in small, meaningful ways. He may share fears, past experiences, or personal reflections that create emotional intimacy. These disclosures are rarely spontaneous accidents. They emerge when emotional containment becomes unsustainable. Another outcome is increased presence. He may begin showing up more consistently, initiating contact, or making space for interaction without dramatic declarations. This shift is not about grand gestures. It is about alignment. His internal world starts matching his external behavior. When thoughts have been persistent, action eventually follows. Sometimes the resolution appears as withdrawal. If emotional tension feels too threatening, the mind may choose distance as a form of self-protection. This withdrawal can be sudden and confusing, but it is not the same as indifference. It is an attempt to quiet the mental loop by removing stimuli. The absence still carries emotional charge. Behavior can also change through redefinition. He may try to reshape the connection into something safer by redefining boundaries, roles, or expectations. This allows continued contact without emotional overload. Redefinition is an adaptive response to unresolved thought, not a dismissal of it. Another sign of resolution pressure is emotional honesty through conflict. When feelings are suppressed for too long, they can surface as frustration or confrontation. These moments are often misunderstood as negativity, but they indicate emotional relevance. People do not engage emotionally with what does not matter. The internal pressure also affects future decisions. When someone has thought about you deeply, your influence remains even if circumstances change. Choices, standards, and emotional expectations shift. You become a reference point. This impact persists beyond active interaction. Understanding this final stage is important because it reminds you that emotional truth moves at its own pace. You cannot force resolution without resistance. Allowing space allows clarity to emerge naturally. Thought sustained over time always demands a response, whether through connection, closure, or transformation. What matters is not the outcome itself, but the recognition that constant thought is never meaningless. It leaves marks on behavior, memory, and emotional structure. When someone has been thinking about you constantly, something within them has already changed. When you understand how emotions truly move beneath the surface, you stop measuring interest by noise and start recognizing it by depth. Silence no longer confuses you, distance no longer feels like rejection, and inconsistency no longer shakes your sense of worth. You begin to see that real emotional attachment is often quiet, conflicted, and carefully hidden, not because it is weak, but because it is powerful enough to feel dangerous to the one experiencing it. Thoughts that return again and again leave traces in behavior, timing, and emotional tension, even when words deny them. This awareness gives you clarity instead of anxiety and confidence instead of doubt. You no longer chase proof or force answers. You observe, you stay grounded, and you allow truth to reveal itself through patterns rather than promises. When you trust your understanding instead of your fear, you step into emotional strength, knowing that what is meant to move toward you will do so naturally without you losing yourself in the process.